Since February 24th, just 85 days ago, trillions of dollars have been wiped out from the world stock market. Long-term borrowing costs have surged to their highest levels in years, and prices of everyday necessities like gasoline and food have skyrocketed to their all-time high. Consumer and business confidence are sinking. Food riots are breaking out, and the world is teetering on the edge of a major recession. In a space of just 3 months, the consequences of the Russia-Ukraine war have been felt around the world. If the United States had not gotten involved, what might have been a regional conflict probably would have been over by now. But it did, and both the US sanctions against Russia and the massive aid to Ukraine have globalized this conflict and divided the world into opposing camps. Everyone should have the right to know why this war is being fought, how much longer it will go on, and what will bring it to an end. Hi, I'm David Wu, a former Wall Street macro strategist with a 20-year track record of making actionable predictions about global change. Welcome to The Money Game, where I take on groupthink, propaganda, and conspiracy theories in my critical analysis of markets, politics, and economics. Before we begin, I invite you to subscribe to my free YouTube channel so that you will be notified when I release a new video. In a famous 2016 interview with The Atlantic magazine, US President Barack Obama explained why he didn't do more to deter Russia in his 2014 invasion of Ukraine. He said that Ukraine is a core interest for Russia in a way that it is not for the United States. That since Ukraine is not part of NATO, it is vulnerable to Russian military domination. And that the United States has to be very clear about what its core interests are and what it's willing to go to war for. It's been barely 6 years since Obama made these pronouncements, and the administration of his former vice president has decided to drag America into the Russian-Ukraine war in a big way. Why? What has changed? To answer this question, we have to go back to December 13th, 2001. On that day, President George W. Bush announced that the United States will be pulling out of the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty, also known as the ABM Treaty, that for 30 years had kept the nuclear arms race between the US and the Soviet Union from spinning out of control.
Good morning. I've just concluded a meeting of my National Security Council. We reviewed what I've discussed with my friend, President Vladimir Putin, over the course of many meetings, many months, and that is the need for America to move beyond the 1972 Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty.
What is the ABM Treaty, and why did the US pull out of it? At the height of the Cold War, it was thought that the only thing that would prevent a superpower from launching a preemptive nuclear strike against the other was if the country under attack could retaliate with second strike capabilities, thus ensuring mutual destruction. This doctrine was called mutually assured destruction, otherwise known as MAD. Indeed, many of the arms control negotiations between the US and the Soviet Union were about how best to maintain the second strike capabilities of each side and to prevent the development of missile shields. The result of these negotiations was the ABM Treaty. Signed in 1972, the US and the Soviet Union agreed to no more than 2 anti-missile defense complexes each. This bought peace for 30 years, until the terrorist attacks on September 11.
Today, I have given formal notice to Russia, in accordance with the treaty, that the United States of America is withdrawing from this almost 30-year-old treaty. The 1972 ABM Treaty was signed by the United States and the Soviet Union at a much different time in a vastly different world.
In 2001, 3 months after September 11, George W. Bush decided to withdraw from the ABM Treaty on the basis that the treaty was hindering the US from protecting itself against terrorists and rogue states. At the time, Putin called this decision a mistake and warned that Russia will have to respond. Today, most arms control experts would agree that Bush, by dismantling the cornerstone of the Cold War arms control framework set off a dangerous new arms race. The ABM Treaty was not the only arms control treaty the U.S. decided it could live without. On October 20th, 2018, President Donald Trump announced that the U.S. will be withdrawing from another landmark arms control treaty between the United States and Russia. The Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, the INF Treaty, signed by President Ronald Reagan and President Mikhail Gorbachev in 1988, had prohibited missiles with ranges between 500 and 5,500 kilometers. The INF was a hugely successful treaty that led to the destruction of 2,692 missiles.
Decades ago, the United States entered into a treaty with Russia in which we agreed to limit and reduce our missile capability. While we followed the agreement and the rules to the letter, Russia repeatedly violated its term. That is why I announced that the United States is officially withdrawing from the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, or INF Treaty. Perhaps
Trump's decision to pull out of the INF Treaty was based on the claim of Russian non-compliance. However, less than 1 month after the treaty became void, the U.S. successfully tested a cruise missile that hit its target after more than 500 kilometers of flight. The test launch prompted Putin to declare, "We can deduct that work over this missile started long before the search of excuses for exiting the treaty." The real reason why Washington decided to end the INF Treaty was because it prohibited it from deploying ground-based intermediate-range missiles in Asia. More precisely, the U.S. felt that the treaty was constraining its ability to contain the growing military power of China, which was not bound by the INF. The U.S. was right to view China as a greater threat to its hegemony. What was Russia's reaction to the U.S. walking away from another major arms control treaty between the two? Well, even before the U.S. terminated the INF Treaty, Moscow was already apprehensive about the anti-missile defense systems that the U.S. had installed in Romania after the end of the ABM Treaty and is building now in Poland. Russia was concerned that these systems could weaken Russia's second strike capabilities in the event of a nuclear attack by the United States. With the termination of the INF Treaty, Moscow became deeply concerned by the loss of strategic balance between the United States and Russia. In theory, the U.S. could reprogram the launchers in Romania and Poland and use them to fire intermediate-range missiles at Russia that could hit Moscow in minutes. This was why, on the eve of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Russia has sent an ultimatum to the U.S. that included a written guarantee that Ukraine will never become a member of NATO, a ban on the deployment of new nuclear weapons by the U.S. and Russia in other countries, and a commitment by both sides to not deploy their armed forces and armaments in areas where such deployment could be viewed as a threat. Biden rejected Putin's red lines, and the rest, of course, is history. Actions have consequences, especially if you are the United States, the most powerful nation in the world. There's no doubt that the Russia-Ukraine war is a direct consequence of the U.S. withdrawal from the ABM Treaty in 2001 and the INF Treaty in 2018 that set off a new arms race. In retrospect, the decisions by Bush and Trump to terminate them were reckless. These treaties, which took years to negotiate, were safeguards. Without them, it is a slippery slope. Without them, a mistake could be easily compounded. This is the greatest risk the world is facing right now in the U.S.-Russia proxy war in Ukraine. Barack Obama was much maligned for his passive foreign policy. With the increasing enthusiasm in Washington for taking the war to Putin, all I can say is that his cautiousness and cool rationality are much missed. I remain of the view that a recession is coming before Thanksgiving. If that is the worst thing to happen between now and then, this will be a Christmas to celebrate. If you got something out of this program, please hit like and subscribe to my free YouTube channel. If you want to learn more about my investment strategy, including how to use stocks and bonds and currencies to express this macro theme and others, please come visit us at davidwunbound.com. Thank you for listening.